process or selection process. Say you were born of noble birth, you were looking like to be a strong kid, and you were on your track towards guardianship, but then they realized when trying to educate you, you weren't that fine quality.
Right, there's a bunch of tests.
What would happen to them if you become just
their guardians?
Class? But it's still in the guardian class?
Yeah, they're guardians. They're just not going to be the ones. They're not going to be philosopher kings.
Okay.
To be clear, the philosopher kings are taken out of the guardian class. They're the best of the guardian class. So there's nobody that's better than the guardians.
So the guardian class is never downgraded to colored instead.
Yeah, no.
Still be there.
Not in this theory. One doesn't start out a guardian. You just don't get the promotion.
Right. I think Plato's theory of the testing people's incorruptibility. I think a huge factor was in his age, because when they're first getting educated, he wants to kind of purify the poetry and all that. Yeah.
So what's the first thing? What's the first part of the education? What do they get first?
Right. They get his pure form of poetry, which is free of the gods and warring.
And what else do they get?
And then they get physical training.
No, there's something else they get early.
Music.
There you go. Which obviously is important if justice is harmony, right? We got to get the right sensibility into them right away. Go ahead.
Right, and then once they've come out of that education, that's when they're incorruptible enough for them to be put under certain influences to really test whether they are actually incorruptible.
And those who prove themselves not to be incorruptible, right, are the ones that get the upgrade. I mean, think about this at Juilliard, or think about this at, the Art Institute of Chicago. So, this is the kind of, these processes aren't foreign to you people. You've all been through processes like these, frankly. That's how you end up at UVA in a lot of ways, right? And so it's just, who keeps getting promoted up the chain, right? After each one of these different types of tests, physical and intellectual, have been put. And those are the folks that end up being philosopher kings, right? But once again, I think that just a greater point is, guardians don't flunk out of guardianship. They might end up being warriors. There might be some other things that they're going to do. Honor as a virtue is not a bad virtue for the Greeks. Okay, they're just not going to be the hegemon or the leader. Right? They're not going to be that, and that's fine. That club should be a small and exclusive club, even amongst the best. Okay? If you think about this, once again, I always like to use the metaphor of the university because Plato's Academy does become the base of the university. Just think of the difference between the number of college students here and the number of doctoral students here. Right? There's probably, 20 college students for every single doctoral student. Right? Those would be your TAs, I guess. Right? But I'm just saying, it's just like the numbers get smaller and smaller as you go up this chain. Allegory of the cave. And clearly, I want somebody to just kind of walk us through this this graphic here. Because this pretty much is the way that we explain it here in class. Somebody want to give it a shot? Somebody's going to give it a shot, I guess. Don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. Okay, go for it then. You just had this look on your eye like, don't do it. We talked about this quite a bit in class.
Yeah, so...
why don't you explain the graph? Walk us through the graph.
Yeah, so knowledge is the basis for being able to apply it. There's two types of knowledge, theoretical and practical.
Slow down. So we start, where does this graph start? Knowledge. What's the beginning at knowledge? And how is that represented in the cave?
I'm sorry?
How is that represented in the actual allegory of the cave? How's that starting to
people watching shadows, and their understanding of reality is limited. They can't turn around, they can't reconsider this to be anything other than truth. It's all in it. Yeah.
So they're not even aware of the fact that they're looking at shadows.
Right.
But those shadows represent knowledge for them at the beginning. They think that those are the facts of the world.
It is knowledge for them in the beginning.
Well, I'll just say it represents knowledge as far as the schema is concerned. I want to make sure that we're clear on that these people aren't starting out with nothing. Right? Knowledge is their quote-unquote understanding of the world in the position that they're in. Okay? So they're starting out with something. They're not starting out with nothing. but that something are the shadows on the wall. And that this cave thing is about how they're disadvantaged thinking that those shadows are reality. Go ahead.
So then there's the man that was able to leave the cave and to like learn about the world outside. And that is the gaining of a theoretical framework to sort of reconsider prior knowledge.
So what are the steps in this cave allegory that get us out of the cave? Make sure that we're mapping this graphic onto the different parts of the story. So first the guy's chained to the wall with a bunch of everybody else and doesn't realize it. Then what happens? He gets out, but what does he immediately, is he immediately outside in the sunshine?
No, he sees the light above and it's like a bright light and he is not sure about it.
What's a critical step before he gets out to the bright light?
Chains are released, and then he turns around and he sees the wall and the fire and the puppets, and then the puppets become his new reality. Like this is the real thing. Like this is the big picture. And then there's the light, and he doesn't want to go towards it, but someone drags him out.
Yeah, he gets dragged out.
Yeah.
But so what I want to just be clear about here is that I think that the reason why this intermediate step between being let out of the chain and being out in the sunshine, right? The reason why I think there's an intermediate step of seeing, oh, I'm in a cave. There's these guys up there with these flames, and they're projecting these images. That this is about the awareness that what one thought was reality is not reality. Like that intermediate stage is the initial, maybe even shock of learning that what you thought was real wasn't real. Okay? So yes, that intermediate step then becomes a new reality in a certain sense. Not that the puppets are the new reality, but just the realization that your old reality. So you're in this purgatory. You're realizing that the old stuff isn't what you used to think it was, but you're not quite to the new stuff yet. So this intermediate stage, right, is that moving towards that one first has to understand that the old stuff is no good, so that you're now prepared to take in the new stuff. You see what I mean? So I think that's one of the reasons why I think that intermediate step is important. And even if you remember it talks about especially as we start coming out, getting dragged out, the physiological effects, the pain and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's a reason why they talk about all of this, right, in that way, in this holistic kind of way. So be clear that there's that intermediate step, and that's about building the initial awareness. So even if the people, and I'll push it a little further, I'll come to you. Even if the people, the other folks, even if you never make it out of the cave, but you could go back and free all the other folks so that they can see that there's this factory producing images. And nobody ever went out to the sun. That still will give them a critical relationship to those shadows. There's still an enlightenment in a certain sense involved in that. Just knowing that what you thought was real isn't real. Just that knowledge in itself, that deconstruction, is a huge step. Coming out, of course, becomes the constructive part. Okay, so I don't know that I've emphasized that enough, but I want to make sure that people are clear on that. Zane, did you have something?
Yeah, just going back to the logical, the intermediate step, I was kind of thinking about it, and if you actually see you're first tied up and then you go immediately to the sun, you're kind of like blinded.
You're going to be blind.
It's almost as if it's too much to kind of, grasp. So I feel from a logical perspective, it's kind of important that you have that intermediate step to, I guess, continue the journey out.
Mm-hmm. And you're still, by the time he comes up, there's still the blindness, the initial pain, you can't really take it all in. There's still the adjustment. Physiologically and intellectually, there's still an adjustment that must be made once one comes out of the cave. Okay? So don't, you know what I mean? But that intermediate step, I agree, prepares one to make that adjustment. Chef, do you want to go further up? So what happens once you get out?
Well, it's blinding and difficult to understand. And talk about how you'd probably be more inclined to study the stars at night because they were more like the dark cave. And then eventually he would become aware of the way that the day and the night changes and get a picture of something bigger that was going on. So that's sort of the theoretical framework, is being out of the cave.
So it's all theoretical going up.
And then the return is the practical.
Okay. Why does one, let me just ask you the question I've asked a million times, why would one go back in the cave? I mean, now we're talking about somebody who's fully adjusted to living outside the cave. Why do they go back?
Justice, there's people and they lack knowledge. And those are,
And you presumably care about that.
yes, I would.
I know you would. I'm just saying. Dude, how do we talk about this? Go ahead.
Isn't there some part about not wanting to be ruled by the blind enough on this? Once you have knowledge, once you have this theoretical framework and know the form of good, you don't want to be ruled by someone who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, one motivation for a philosopher king who really wants just a life of contemplation to get involved with politics, I think this came out in book 2 or whatever, was that, well, I wouldn't want these people who don't have knowledge running the show, the show that you're a part of. So, okay, begrudgingly, I'll do it. What else? What else?
I guess once you have the understanding, you feel a responsibility and obligation to the city that gave it to you, the way you got there, to share it and try to get people as liberated as possible. And also, your desires change. You don't really, you're thinking of it less personally, not as like this is understanding for me, but as I need to spread this.
So there's some sort of duty or obligation. I mean, if we attach it to the Paideia system, the education system, the city puts you through all this. So you know what? I'm glad you made it to the top. Now get out there and do your job. So there's part of that kind of obligation to it. Some of it, like Shep said, is that after you get oriented towards the good, there's the kind of the mission drive to want to share that or be a part of doing that for the folks that are back home. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the sort of like obligation of a teacher, like not just to return to like rule like a philosopher king. I think that would be one specific instance of like just returning to share knowledge for the sake of providing this opportunity for more people to have understanding and apply knowledge.
I want to move on to the next step of this.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, now that, his knowledge has become understanding, it's almost like comparable to like a PhD program almost. Like, once you get to that stage, the only logical step is to kind of, go back and teach, which is why I feel it becomes a duty to go back in the cave.
Wait. I see this as being totally different from a PhD. So you started out your sentence saying, now that we're at practical or at understanding, I'm like, are we really there? We're still outside, right? Thinking about going back in the cave. To me, if you're still in the ivory tower for the most part, it's because you don't want to go into the world of practical affairs. And there is a life that one can lead, right? And there's motivations of why one would want to stay in the ivory tower. It could be teaching, it could be a lot of different things, right? But phronesis, let's talk about what phronesis is. What's phronesis? Phronesis.
Basically, practical wisdom.
I mean, that's technically it. I mean, how is it different from Sophia?
Sophia is the theory, and whereas phronesis is like the application of that theory.
It's the understanding that one has, that one gets from applying the theoretical stuff to the world. This is really important.